All right, welcome back to One True Podcast, talking Baylor and Big 12 college football. With me, as always, is the one and only John Werner. How are you, John?
Well, it's another bad hair day, Brice. I've had a string of them.
Hopefully there's just, we have more listeners than viewers. How about that?
There we go. That sounds good.
Joining us this week is our special guest, Stephen Simcox. Stephen formerly worked here in radio in Central Texas, and now Stephen, you're up in the Metroplex, correct now? Or
I'm actually still local. I'm in McGregor. So.
Okay, good. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, but you are doing a podcast, the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast. Been doing that a couple of years. I assume people can get that wherever they find their podcasts.
Yep, anywhere you get podcasts, and then we're also on YouTube. So either way you want to digest that content is okay with me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for hopping on with us for sure. So guys, no offense to Bedlam, no offense to K-State, who's obviously bounced back nicely, or really any other Big 12 related topic, but I'm making this an all rivalry edition of One True Podcast because I think we've got enough Baylor, TCU topics to cover here. So let's start with the Horned Frogs. A lot of people in college football land, including this one right here, thought that the Frogs would take their first loss last weekend in Austin. But instead they went down there, kind of an ugly game, but they pull it out 17-10. And in the process, not only do they stay undefeated, but they clinched that spot in Jerry World for the Big 12 championship game. So, Stephen, I'm going to start with you on this question. John, we'll hear from you in a second, but how does TCU just keep doing this week after week after week? How do they keep winning? And is the gap between them and the rest of the Big 12 really that wide?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I think as far as how they keep winning, they've been a really good second half football team. They had some comeback victories against Oklahoma State and K-State where their defense started out really slow and then slowly just kind of adjusted to what those teams were doing. Their offense has been able to score. Now, the last few weeks, they've kind of hit a little bit of a rut, and the defense has picked them up. I think they're more physical than people realize. When people hear Sonny Dykes, they don't think about physicality. They think about air raid and throwing the ball around. But I honestly feel like what they're best at is running between the tackles with Kendre Miller and Max Duggan, their quarterback, at times as well. So they've kind of worn on people and leaned on people and made plays, in the fourth quarter. The game against Texas was a total 180 from the style of play that they've really had most of the year. I mean, the defense just stepped up in a huge way. If you told me they would have held Bijan Robinson to 29 yards going into that football game, I would not have believed you, but they found a way to do it. So I don't think there's a huge gap. I mean, I just feel like they've been more consistent than everybody else. The league as a whole has really been a week-to-week league. Baylor has kind of been up and down. K-State, I think really K-State, it just comes down to, I feel like Will Howard's the better quarterback. And now that he appears to be taking over full time, I think that's a pretty formidable team. But Texas has been inconsistent. I think they're young. So I just honestly feel like TCU's been able to kind of, with a lot of veteran players, hold serve and take care of business each week. But I don't get the sense that there's like a huge talent gap or that they're just better at one aspect of the game than the rest of the league is.
John?
Yeah, I wrote about this a few days ago, but I think they're a lot like Baylor was last year. They just somehow get it done. They're not just greatly more talented than other teams, but, big plays, whatever they need, big plays, turnovers, they just get it done at the right time. And it's really been pretty impressive to see. And, they've got Duggan's had an incredible year. I think he should be Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. And Kendre Miller's been great. And they've got really good, breakout receivers. So it's a really good team. And, it'd be nice to see them make the college football playoffs.
Yeah, when you win one or two close games, maybe that gives you the confidence and the know-how to do it again. Obviously, they've done it over and over and over. I agree with both you guys. I mean, Stephen made the point that the rest of the league, to me, it's a very dog-eat-dog conference this year. Very parity filled. We've discussed that plenty on this podcast this year, but I just feel like TCU has all the ingredients, and of a conference championship kind of team, and the fact that they have managed to go 10-0 is pretty incredible, really, because teams, the best OU teams didn't usually get through this conference unscathed. Now they got 2 more games to get through, but we'll see how that goes. Let's talk about one of those. So this week we get the revival of one of the conference's best rivalries. You guys see what I did there. When Sonny Dykes and the Frogs do come to Waco to face Baylor. So all logic says that TCU should win this game, right? I mean, the Frogs still have a lot to play for with that CFP out there. They're winning those close games, as we said. Got the number 1 offense in the Big 12, coming off their best defensive game of the year, so forth and so on. So meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, Baylor is coming off of what was that sort of performance? 31-3 loss to K-State. And to me, they looked flatter than Dave Aranda's monotone. I mean, it was just not good. So there's no chance Baylor plays spoiler here, is there?
Man, it's a good question. I think this series has been really strange the last few seasons, and it's typically been reversed. Like last year when we talked, TCU had just let Garrett Patterson go. It seemed like there was obviously no chance they were going to compete, and then we know they pulled off the upset. I mean, even that 2019 team that Matt Rule had that was rolling really well. If not for Mayers hitting, I think it was like a 54-yard field goal at the buzzer to send it into overtime, TCU would have won that game as well. They've just kind of had some good efforts. I expect Baylor to bounce back and play well. I just think Dave Aranda and Ron Roberts and that coaching staff are too good and have too much pride to allow them to come out and have another performance like that. There has been a recipe to slow this TCU offense down the last couple of weeks, which has been bringing a lot of pressure. Like blitzes have, gotten to Max Duggan and have caused them to kind of adjust on the fly with what they're doing. So I expect them to try to continue that. We'll see if TCU has a counter. If I'm picking straight up, I'm going to pick the Frogs, but Baylor's a good team. I think I had higher expectations for them at least than they are, now before the season. If Blake Shapen can kind of figure something out and play better and this defense plays well, I think they'll have a shot. But it certainly feels like TCU is definitely the team with more momentum and the group that has a lot more to play for. I just can't shake the feeling that it is a rivalry game. I don't know how much it means to these guys. It doesn't have the same heat that it did when Art and Gary were there. Those 2 coaches truly, I think, hated each other, and that permeated through the fan base and through the players. But it's still got to mean something. It's the 2 private schools in the league. They're 90 minutes apart. Like, I think Baylor's going to have some motivation this week.
And now you got Kaz Kazadi at TCU. I mean, it just still seems weird to me.
Yeah. It's so strange. I mean, I know you guys remember him yelling at TCU fans.
Oh, yeah. We were standing right there.
That game in Fort Worth. And, it's strange. And I think he's made a huge difference. I mean, I feel like you see their ability to kind of win games in the second half, and Kaz has played a huge role in that. But, yeah, I'm not sure everybody understands the irony of that because, I mean, he was in a lot of ways sometimes the face. He has a personality that goes way past strength and conditioning. Everybody knows who he is. And, I remember in Waco, people loved him. So it's really weird to see him on the sidelines.
Yeah, no doubt. John, what do you say? Can Baylor spring the upset here?
I don't think they will, but I was surprised. They're only a 2.5 point underdog to TCU.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, like Stephen says, strange things happen in this series. And I will say in the last 10 years, I think the Horned Frogs generally get a little more up for this game than Baylor. I think, they felt like they were, kind of got the shaft, not getting in the Big 12 earlier. And I think they've always kind of had that chip on their shoulder. Now, I mean, this is such a great chance for Baylor to, get revenge for last year, some other games. I mean, I think they're clearly the underdog here. But I don't know. I still see the Horned Frogs winning this game.
Yeah, it was such a weird game last week for Baylor. Not that K-State won and bounced back and, like they did. Obviously, K-State's a good team, but just, as I mentioned, how flat Baylor was, it was surprising. I mean, they had honestly, I felt like during that 3-game winning streak, they were playing as well as anyone in the conference, maybe including TCU, but maybe that was who they were playing. I don't know. I mean, 2 of those games came on the road, so I don't think you could just completely discount that. I do agree with Stephen that I think they bounce back and play better this week. Will that result in a win? I don't know. I mean, I still, if I'm picking this game, which I do have to at some point, I'm picking the Frogs. But again, as Stephen said, it is a weird rivalry. We certainly didn't see that TCU win coming last year. Was it Chandler Morris?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I remember saying we'll call from 10, 20 years from now, we'll call that the Chandler Morris game. That was his breakout game. The other weird thing about that game, there was a lot of weirdness that day, but John, you probably will remember this. And maybe when our computer guy can go back and find my photo I took of this guy on Twitter, but right in front of the press box, there was a Gary Patterson lookalike.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I
What's
mean,
he doing in the stands?
This guy looks so much like Gary Patterson. I remember taking a picture of him and going, he's still here, guys.
And they won too.
And they won. So, maybe maybe they had some good GP mojo there. I don't know. But that was pretty funny.
That was funny.
So, back to the Frogs. They are number 4 in the latest CFP standings as we record our podcast that came out last night. But so I saw a stat on SportsCenter last night, just kind of on the scroll on the scroll on the bottom of the screen, that said TCU had a 30-something, maybe 36, I can't remember, % chance to make the CFP at the end of the year. And then I saw it popped up and it said that Tennessee had a 60-something % chance. And, obviously TCU right now is above Tennessee in those standings. I don't know how they do the math on those things. I assume that's expecting TCU to stumble somewhere in these last 3 games, maybe in the Big 12 championship game, because there is no way an undefeated Big 12 champion gets left out of this thing. Is there?
I don't think so. I mean, to me, that'd make the committee look really bad.
Really bad.
Yeah. And, but yeah, that percentage must be based on if TCU loses, because I don't think there's any way they could leave them out if they're unbeaten. I know like USC has some really good games left. They'd probably be in pretty prime position, too, just like Tennessee, if TCU lost. But yeah, you can't leave an unbeaten Horned Frogs out.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, if you leave an unbeaten Power 5 team out, then you just got to blow the whole thing up because it defeats the purpose. Yeah. Defeats the purpose of the system. I mean, there's some things that could happen that could throw a wrench and stuff. Like if LSU finds a way to beat Georgia, then that makes their case really compelling. As John said, like USC has a chance to finish 12-1 with a Pac-12 title, which would give them a good opportunity. But if they're undefeated, they're in. I really think Saturday is the only game they could lose and still have a chance. Like if you lose on the road to a Baylor team that's finishes 7-5 or 8-4, at least the committee can look at that and say, okay, well, all right, you stumbled on the road once. That makes sense. You still win the conference title game. If they lose to Iowa State, I think that drops them out. If they lose to even K-State in the conference title game, I just feel like the fact that they would not be the Big 12 champion would sort of disqualify them. But certainly the easiest thing to do is win out. If they win out and don't get in, then Brett Yormark's got to drive up to Grapevine or wherever that committee meets and handle some business, because then the Big 12 is in real trouble if that happens.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like it's so much about brand names, and it feels like Alabama could get in with 3 losses sometimes, I mean, because they're just Alabama, right? But I would say that if TCU got left out in that scenario, that they would have an even bigger gripe than they had back in 2014 or whatever that was, that very first year of the CFP, when they finished 6th, despite being 5th in the standings the week before.
Third. Yeah,
third.
And
third. Sorry.
State.
Yeah. Third.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah. 3rd to 5th. Yeah, is where they went. And they smoked whoever they played in that last game. Now, so did Baylor. And I always thought that Baylor actually did deserve to be ranked ahead of them based on the head-to-head thing that year. But both of them had really good cases. And here's the thing. I realize Ohio State got in that year and ended up winning the whole thing. Who's to say Baylor or TCU couldn't have won the whole thing that year?
Yeah, I mean the namesake of this podcast, right? The one true champion year where they split the title. It was a mess. And how fun would that have been because those two schools were sniping each other every single week. It was like TCU and Baylor weren't playing their opponents. It was like they were playing each other on a week in, week out basis. It would have just been awesome to see them play in Cowboy Stadium for a Big 12 title. But of course we know that, that didn't happen at that
right.
point.
Yeah, and I feel like the seeds for a 12 team playoff may have even been planted that year, because we've been talking ever since about, the teams that got left out and probably should have been in. So let's say Sonny Dykes does get TCU in year 1 there in Fort Worth. That would be pretty incredible. Obviously, he would be properly lauded with all kinds of National Coach of the Year awards. He probably still will be, no matter how it plays out these last 3 games. But if that happens, I'm kind of wondering how that would affect Gary Patterson's legacy there in Fort Worth. Obviously, he's got a statue outside of the stadium. We know what he did there for 2 decades. Won a lot of games, won a lot of bowl games, had him, just had him right there every year. So what do y'all think as far as, would that tarnish Patterson's legacy if Sonny were able to take TCU to a place that Patterson never did in year 1?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it tarnishes it. I feel like he would still be sort of seen as the architect, right? Like he got them to a Power 5 conference. He won a Rose Bowl, which was, at this point, the biggest win in school history. Won another New Year's 6 game against Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl in 2014. It is sort of a fascinating thing to watch, though. This is it's his team. They brought in a few transfers that have made impacts, but Max has been a quarterback here for now 4 seasons. Quentin Johnson and Kendre Miller and a lot of other players on that offense have been here for years. So Sonny has definitely unlocked something. The tricky thing for Sonny now is if he does get there in year 1, sort of where do you go after that? That's a hard act to follow. And it's not something that you can do year in and year out. But I think it probably just depends on part of the Gary's appeal too was it's so rare now to have somebody stay in one place for 20 plus years. Like you just don't see that, especially at a place like TCU. I think the job's changed now, but when he started there, it was kind of a stepping stone to the next job. So I feel like there's still a lot that has to be played out. I don't think it tarnishes his legacy, but it is really fascinating that they're kind of on the verge of this when, I mean, to be honest, like this was a mediocre program the last couple of years. They were 5-7 or 6-4, kind of hovering around that range, and they've doubled their win total from last year. So it's really impressive stuff from Sonny.
John?
Yeah, I don't think it would tarnish it, like Stephen said, but I do think it shows that he was still bringing in talent. He just couldn't get them to rise to the occasion, I guess, or play to their talent, because they've obviously have talent. I mean, to do what they're doing this year, just seems like they just needed a new coach and a new system, and just to kind of get them revived again, to get them revived in the rivalry.
I like it. Yeah, I almost compare this a little bit to when Mac Brown left Texas. And stay with me on this. So I think at the end of Mac Brown's tenure, there were just a lot of UT fans who were disgruntled about, they weren't quite living up to expectations. And yeah, they were still getting some good recruits in, but they weren't winning at the level that they wanted to win at. And, he gets pushed out, and we've seen what a mess Texas has been ever since. Now, in hindsight, there's a lot of, man, Mac Brown wouldn't be bad, that kind of thing. But this is obviously a little different than that. I feel like where Texas didn't find the right guy, TCU did. And obviously they just had to go right across town, right across the Metroplex to get the guy. But, I think it could have worked out like that if they'd have hired the wrong guy.
Yeah.
But,
Brice and John, did you guys see that story from Kirk Bowles late last week that allegedly Chris Del Conte had kind of a handshake deal with Sonny at Texas, and then the boosters were like, no, try again, and then that's how they ended up with Sark?
Yeah, I did see that. That was interesting.
That is interesting. Wow.
It was curious to me because I was honestly a little underwhelmed when he got the job. I thought he was a good coach, but I just felt like it was kind of a cop-out because he was right there in the Metroplex. He had beaten TCU a few times. But I didn't realize, if that's true, kind of the respect that he had across the industry, that, he would be up for the Texas job. Because that's not a job I would have thought that he would have been able to jump to from SMU. But anyway, it was just kind of a fascinating fact.
Yeah, that does speak to the level of respect he got. I'm with you. I was a little underwhelmed, honestly. Maybe even compared to some other hires like Joey McGuire at Tech, who I feel like is the perfect fit in Lubbock. It's certainly looking like a good fit for Sonny Dykes at TCU right now. Stephen, I think you also made a good point about, if he does go to the CFP in year one, where do you go from here kind of thing. I think, Dave Aranda's experiencing a little of that this year. Obviously, year two for him was the big year. Year one, I think he just chalked that up to whatever. It was COVID and it was a tough transition. But year two, Aranda takes Baylor to a Big 12 championship game. And now I feel like they're fighting a little of that expectations. I think, you saw that they were the preseason number one team in the Big 12 for the first time ever. And there's, a fair amount of hand wringing and gnashing of teeth from the Baylor fans, just because, they might go 8-4, 7-5 rather than, 12-1 or whatever. But, expectations kind of they're good and they're bad. I mean, obviously you want to be one of the best teams in the country, but it does put that pressure on you to try to replicate that, year after year. So can Sonny Dykes do that? We'll see. I mean, I like what he's doing there. That's for sure. I will also put in a little plug here. So this is a sign that it's a new era at TCU. John knows where I'm going.
I know where you're going.
So back in the day when Gary Patterson was the head coach, he was among the few in the Big 12. I would lump him in with Bill Snyder at K-State and probably when Mike Leach was at Texas Tech, who was very, I don't know what the word, protective or whatever of his players and not putting them out there in the media. He was very much a control freak in that regard. And this is who you could talk to. I think he would often trot the same guy out each week,
like a third team center.
Right. Which, who cares? Who wants to talk to that guy? But so anyway, I'm doing a story this week on Trevius Hodges-Tomlinson, the stud cornerback for TCU, Midway product, playing great again. He's been all Big 12 the last 2 seasons before this one. I assume he will be again. He's got 3 interceptions, playing great. I assume we'll also see Trevius in the NFL. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, talking to him today.
Good.
Yeah, that's great. And no, you're right. Gary's famous line was, if I tell you, then I'm telling X, right? So if I tell you who's starting a quarterback this week, then I'm also telling Baylor or Texas or whoever it is. So it's been almost like whiplash seeing, like I remember Sonny a couple of weeks ago did an interview with like Barstool Sports, which is fine. I mean, like he's just kind of doing whatever they ask him to do, but it's just strange to see him going on like ESPN and all these shows. I'm like, oh man, this is such a different world than we were living in for the past decade or so.
So I got a little curveball here at the end. So Stephen, on our podcast, we usually finish talking about food, but
like it, yeah.
Yeah, we call it our culinary corner. And here's what I want to know. This is one I actually asked John, I think last week. So Thanksgiving's coming up. This is the Super Bowl of food holidays. I mean, when you are loading up that plate on Turkey Day, what's like the one thing that, I mean, you're looking forward to the most?
Oh, wow. Probably like pumpkin pie.
Oh yeah, baby.
That's my
yes.
thing.
Make that a sweet, right?
Yeah, I'll go straight to dessert. I'm also like, I like cranberry sauce. It's not that I love it, but it's that's the only time of year that I'm gonna get it. So I enjoy that. But yeah, pumpkin pie, and then like sides, mac and cheese, even though that's something that's pretty standard, but those are my go-tos.
That's awesome. Those are great choices. Pumpkin pie is literally, as John is well aware, my favorite food on the planet.
All right.
And John, you have told me before, it is a superfood.
Superfood. That's
that
straight
pumpkin
from my wife.
Pumpkin is a superfood. So I feel like not only am I eating a dessert, apparently it's somewhat healthy for me, right?
That's
exactly,
right,
Brice.
That.
That's why you went to it.
That's what we're gonna say anyway. So anyway, check out Locked On Horned Frogs podcast with Stephen Simcox. And Stephen, man, great to talk to you. Thanks for hopping on. Should be a fun game on Saturday. We got big noon kickoff here in Waco. Yep. I didn't really see that coming, but I mean, okay. So I mean, obviously I guess they're here for TCU, but I just felt like TCU's got the Big 12 locked up now. So, I don't know, it to me, it was a little bit of a head scratching choice, but whatever. So
yeah. And I think they're sending, so it's weird. So Joel Klatt and Gus usually do that game, but they're sending them to USC, UCLA. So I don't know who the talent's going to be for for the Baylor TCU game. But it should be a great matchup, and yeah, I'm excited about it.
I heard him at the basketball game last night over at the Farrell Center say something about Leinart and Reggie Bush would be there, and
Okay.
so I don't know who's along with those guys, but anyway.
Mhm.
So if you want to go check out Big Noon Kickoff, do that. Certainly check out Locked On Horned Frogs and visit us on wacotrib.com, and we'll have more coverage of this rivalry. But guys, thanks, appreciate it.
See you guys.
All right, thanks guys.